Welcome to Something More with Chris Boyd, certified financial planner practitioner and founder of Asset Management Resources, LLC, a registered investment advisor firm. We call it Something More because we like to talk not only about those important dollar and cents issues, but also the quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Here he is, your fulfillment facilitator, your partner in prosperity, advising clients across the country, your host, J. Christopher Boyd.
All right, welcome. This is Something More with Chris Boyd. I'm here with Jeff Perry. We're both of Asset Management Resources, and glad to have you with us for this program. Jeff, always things to be thinking about at year end. And as we mentioned, we're in that final couple of months. The clocks have turned. We've got as we go into this weekend, and lots to think about. So you had an interesting article that has some suggestions that maybe we can share with our listeners as they think about preparing for year end. What are some of the things we need to be preparing for?
Thanksgiving, Christmas, it's financial things, right?
Well, those are important too. And just despite your joke, I mean, we often need to remind people about this can be a very costly time of year, and
emotionally costly as well. Like feeling costly. You need to do certain things.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. That wasn't where my head was going, but you're right. It's not always an easy time of year for people. People who feel more isolated when they feel like it's sort of that FOMO or whatever it's called, but where everyone seems to be jolly and filled with all kinds of hallmark moments that maybe are
don't buy it.
It doesn't happen for everybody, right?
It's an illusion, right?
so in any case, I think what I was going with that though is, it can also be an expensive time if we're not intentional about it. Not everyone has all kinds of gifts, but I just think of when we had little kids, it would just get away from us.
Sure.
You know what I mean? You'd say, Kristen would she did most of the shopping, and I was terrible at planning ahead on that stuff. But, you'd say, well, let's get a little of this, and you'd want to make it even. Well, we got that one more. We got to get some more over here. And, you'd end up with this, they really want the whatever. And that's an expensive video,
the big gift, right?
Whatever it is, whatever it is. Yep. And so it can add up, and I think it's important to sort of step back and say, what's my intended budget? Number one. Number two, people are happy without necessarily stuff, and so you do want, everyone likes creature comforts, and you do want to have your kids feel like they're getting, things that their friends have or whatever it might be, and not to be left out. But this is the time of year when it's important to maybe step back a little bit and say, what can I afford? What do I really want to spend? And then what's the best way to go about that? Do I want a lot of things under the tree, one big thing under the tree, or whatever it is, however you do it, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So things to consider. But that's not really where we're going with this episode either.
You and I get off onto tangents real easy.
Yeah, but hopefully they're helpful tangents. Yeah, I'm going to delude myself with that thought.
I think they are. So I was reading. I read a lot, as you do. One of the things I still get a hard copy of, believe it or not, is Kiplinger's magazine. Comes in the mail. There's a few of them left, not too many.
Do you get a newspaper still?
No, I read online. Google Feed is my news.
Yeah.
I have a news, I've set up a news feed based upon what I want to see, subjects I want to see, from the sources I want to see.
Yeah.
And that's how
I like to look at certain newspapers, but I prefer to do it online now. It just seems more efficient and, easier to zip through. But certain publications, they charge you more if you don't get the paper.
Yeah. Well, okay. They're
Easy.
trying to survive, right?
Yeah, it's like I don't want the paper. All right,
Mhm.
fine. But anyway.
So as we are in November here, Kipling just had an article that I thought was worth sharing, and it's the 5 tax moves retirees should consider before the end of the year.
Yep.
Um,
It's good. 5 tax moves. All right. It's good planning time of year. I bet I know
below, go ahead.
one of them has to be for retirees to be thinking about required distributions. It's
RMDs. Yes, that's number 4, but we can start there. So this has been some changes in recent years about what that age is, right?
right.
First
That's
of
right.
all, and if you don't take them, there used to be this big penalty, and that's been diminished, but still there. So, yes. So if you haven't taken an RMD and you're of the age,
It's at that time. So just for those couple of considerations. So if you're
sure.
age 73, that's one occasion where you need to start 73 or older. You need
Mhm.
to start your required distributions this year. There are occasions where you can push it into next year. For example, if you're working this year but you're retired next year, you might entertain whether or not to take that distribution. Um, where your birthday falls could be relevant in that conversation. And
That's right.
generally, I would say take the distribution in this year because even if you push it off into next year, then you have to take 2 distributions, your 2023 distribution and your 2024 distribution. And generally, you don't want to do that. So it's intended really as a safety valve for someone who might have forgotten to take it when they're supposed to. So if you turn
Right.
73 this year, you should, or older, you should make sure you take your distribution requirement before the end of the year. If you have a beneficiary IRA, an inherited IRA, these are also subject to distribution requirements oftentimes, most times, but not in all circumstances. So you may want to be looking at that scenario, whether you are obligated to take at least a required minimum distribution out, even if you're under a 10-year clock and you don't necessarily have to take it all out, till 10 years after the year somebody passed.
Right.
But um, you may be in a situation, some instances where someone died prior to reaching that required distribution age, the required beginning date, where you may not have any distribution requirements, even though it's an inherited IRA for the annual. You just have the clock 5 or 10 years, depending on which circumstances apply. And of course, there are some unusual circumstances where someone can actually still have a lifetime withdrawal cycle. Of course, a spouse, you can deal with it
Right.
over a lifetime. But even like if you inherited a sibling who had a required distribution, you don't have the 10-year clock. You might have a lifetime. The stretch still apply.
Yeah.
There are other some unique
Some
circumstances.
complicated new rules. So,
Yeah.
reach out to your advisor or your CPA and make a plan, but don't miss it.
Right. Complex. But
Yep.
anyway,
And
so
don't
that's
forget about those taxes. If you take one, you should withhold the estimated tax for
generally better
convenience.
to withhold. You don't have to
Yeah.
withhold if you,
Right.
but generally better to withhold so you're not,
Yep.
getting hit by surprise with, oh yeah, didn't do an
Yep.
estimate or something. And then, kind of related to that distribution requirement, might be there's still time for people. Maybe this is another one of your items, Jeff, but in the article, but there's still time for someone who's working if you haven't contributed as much to your plan.
Right.
You could arguably, with the next 2 months of payroll or whatever, overload some of your contributions if you should want to, and make sure you maximize whatever benefits you have available to benefit from. That could be matching, or that could be whatever the ceiling of how much you can contribute to your retirement account.
Yep.
But those are a couple of typical year-end things to think about. What are
And
some other?
it can make a big difference.
Yeah,
So staying on the theme of retirement accounts, Roth conversions, if you were considering converting a traditional IRA into a Roth, you still have some time to do it by the end of the year. It has a tax consequence, right? But it may be a good year for you to think about it, depending on your own individual tax situation this year. Perhaps it's a year of low taxable income, or you may be looking at it in the context of your investment situation.
Yeah, this is another one of those it depends or
Yep.
maybe kind of answers for people. We do really like to look at this as a planning strategy, particularly for people who have large retirement accounts. And the reason for that is if you have a large retirement account, it's very likely that the required distributions that you take as you age very well may push you into higher tax brackets. And it may be sensible for you to think about taking some of that tax burden sooner at a lower tax rate
Right.
than having it force you into higher tax rates later in life. Trade-offs in the whole process, but that's what you're really trying to look at for most people. Is it worth it? And of course, whether you should be investing in a Roth 401k, IRA, whatever. Largely comes down to a couple of things. If you're in a very high tax bracket or a very low tax bracket, the answer may be yes. Probably
Right.
worth looking at, so, and for everyone in between, might be one of those things like so many things in investing, Jeff, it's rarely black and white. It's rarely absolutely yes, absolutely no. It's oftentimes, some of both, right? So when it comes to
It's not 100% one or the other.
right, should I be investing
Right.
in stock? Should I be investing in bond? Well, it's not necessarily only one or the other.
Yes.
Sometimes it's a degree. It's how much of which. And the same kind of might apply for people thinking about traditional versus Roth. There may be some merit to thinking, well, maybe I don't want to do all of one only. Maybe I want to do a combination of these things. And depending on where you fall on the tax rates and income levels might answer how you think about that.
Two additional comments. I think people are starting to think as 2025, 26 gets a little closer too.
Yeah.
And why I'm saying that is the reduction of our federal income taxes is going to revert back to the original. And I hate
Prior
to say
to the
original,
Tax
the
Cut and
prior
Jobs
to.
Act,
Thank you.
which was
So,
the Trump tax cuts that people think
Right.
about. Remember, you got higher standard deduction and the rates, the tax rates went a little lower. The thresholds for when you got into those
Right.
rates went a little higher. So generally, people paid a little less tax.
And although Congress and whoever the next president is could do something, I think the consensus is that our taxes, our federal tax burden per an individual, however they configure it, or if they do nothing, is going up with our deficits and our entitlement reforms that are coming. It's highly unlikely we're going to see lower taxes in the future. So maybe now that just adds a little bit to the Roth conversion discussion. And we have great software that we can model it out for people if they would like some help. If, putting some analysis to, is this right for me, can, come down to some complicated equations, and we have some software that we can help people walk through it if they're interested.
Yeah, it's very effective in thinking those issues through. Good point.
So moving on from that, not just think about retirement accounts, but taxable accounts, whether it's a brokerage account or some other investment that you have, is thinking about your capital gains for this year. That to me means a couple of things. One thing we usually bring up is if you have losses or gains, do you want to try to match them, kind of offset gains with losses, or however you want to frame it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's definitely some virtue if you've had gains that you might benefit from trying to realize losses, do a little tax strategy in the process. Or, as to your point, conversely, if you've realized losses along the way, it's maybe worth thinking about. Would I be benefited by taking a gain to realize and then just replace that position with either an equivalent position or, wait out the wash rule time for that 30 so days. I do think this is an often misunderstood, the virtues of tax loss harvesting, um,
Hmm.
area of planning and portfolio management. Most people look at a loss as a negative thing, and of course, it's not something anyone aspires to. But when you do have losses, and even if they're modest, you can still replace the asset with a comparable asset oftentimes. So if I happen to have a corporate bond portfolio, um, in intermediate term, sorry about that, I could probably get a very similar strategy that would give me virtually the same results,
Hmm.
while at the same time taking a loss in an example where, oh, the price of that's gone down. That'll help me offset some of the taxes I had because I had something that went up and we had to sell some off. Um, that's a consolation prize, and it can often be a smart thing to do from costs. The tax costs can make for better outcomes. So
Yep.
don't necessarily look at tax loss harvesting as I've got locked into losses. Oftentimes, you're just making a lateral move to a very equivalent investment, but you're intentionally planning the tax strategy a little bit
That's right.
more efficiently.
Yep. And you may have some losses carry forward from last year, 2022. A lot of people had losses, so you may have some. Check your last tax return last year and see if you have opportunities to use them.
Yeah,
Right.
a very helpful, one of the things when we look at tax returns when we do financial planning is to look for that to say how much freedom do we have
Hmm.
because of what may have been realized for losses in the past. It can be liberating when it comes to thinking about some of your tax burdens. Um, and incidentally, if you need help with thinking about your financial planning and any of these issues, just know that we offer a complimentary consultation, and we're happy to talk to you about how you might benefit from any of these strategies along the way. You can connect with us on our website, amrfinancial.com. Jeff, I do this podcast called the Wicked Pissa Podcast. It's designed for
Sure.
financial advisors, and I'm one of the hosts connected to the Financial Planning Association of New England chapter that produced this podcast that I helped to start. And one of the things that we just had an interesting conversation with a firm that was talking about qualified opportunity zones. And this is an area that's really, I think, hardly familiar to people, and might be a good topic for us to think about for a radio show for our client, our listeners. Qualified opportunity zones are a way to invest and get some real meaningful tax benefits where you can essentially, if you have meaningful capital gains, essentially what it is, you can avoid the capital gain for a couple of years till I think it's 2026. Then you'll have the capital gain. But if you hold on to the investment for, I think it was 10 years, whatever gains it might have subsequently, um, do not materialize for you. You end up with
Hmm.
a tax free benefit on that. So, anyway, just an interesting subject matter and not something we talk about because it's not for everybody, obviously, but
Right.
something worth maybe coming back to as a future topic.
Absolutely. Sounds
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, tax strategy stuff.
There's, I know we're running out of time for the segment, a couple of minutes left, but
Yeah,
the other two that are in this article that was on Kiplinger's that you can just maybe provide some brief comments is evaluating your Medicare thresholds, the old IRMA,
yeah,
and then consideration of qualified charitable distribution, QCDs.
yeah. I just talked about the QCD with a client the other day. You and I were in that
I
meeting.
was on it. Yep.
Yeah, and
Sounds
he
good,
was.
good opportunity for him.
Yeah, he was someone who was saying he doesn't really use his required distributions that much. He tends to take the distribution close to year end and then turn around and use it for charitable giving purposes, or
Right.
certainly a lot of it. He didn't say specifically whether it's all of it or most of it. It sounded like most of it.
Sounded like most of it, yeah.
Yeah. And, we were trying to point out that this could be a real win for him to avoid a significant amount of tax by turning around instead of taking it out as a distribution taxable event and then making a contribution deduction, but not as much of a tax benefit.
Right.
He could essentially do a qualified charitable distribution through his. He was using Schwab, but whoever your custodian is, fill out their form, say, I want to donate $1,000 to this place, $1,000 to that place, whatever it is, right? And it goes directly to the charity from your IRA. You do not get a tax event in the process, but you do get the benefit of counting toward your required distribution withdrawal amount. So it's leaving your account. It reduces your RMD essentially, and the charity receives it tax free because they don't have a tax consequence. And you as the IRA owner, again, you have to be, in this case, 70 and a half or older to benefit from a qualified charitable distribution strategy, which is the old number. We were just talking earlier, 73 is the new number for distributions. This number is still 70 and a half. So if you're 70 and a half, you have charitable intent, you have a window where you have access to your IRA money, no tax consequence to you, and you can benefit your charitable intent.
Arguably, you can be more generous.
Yeah, I mean, what a great opportunity because you're not having tax. So that's a real win. The other thing you mentioned was the Medicare premium considerations.
That's a longer discussion. I'm not sure we have time.
I'll just quickly say this. Remember that these are calculated based on a given tax return. Let's say this year's tax return. In 2 years, your premiums will be impacted by that. So if you have the opportunity to control your income, you want to pay attention to what are the thresholds for when these premiums go up. And if there's opportunity to reduce them or not exceed a certain threshold, you want to be intentional about limiting your tax implications because it's another hidden tax, basically.
Yeah, planning goes a long way here.
Yeah, so one of the things to think about. Jeff, it's been a great show. Thanks. Appreciate good talk.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Yeah,
good,
always.
A topic for that and lots to think about between now and the end of the year. If you need any help, of course, reach out to us at AMR. We're here to help. AMRfinancial.com. Until next time, keep striving for something more.
Thank you for listening to Something More with Chris Boyd. Call us for help, whether it's financial planning, portfolio management, insurance concerns, or those quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Whatever's on your mind, visit us at amrfinancial.com or call us toll free at 866-771-8901 or send us your questions to radio@amrfinancial.com.